together, a journey of reconstruction, allowing Jesus to deconstruct and reconstruct us. This is reconstruction.
Good morning, everyone. How are we doing? Thank you. There we go. There are some people in the room here. It's been a fun morning because it rained, so we are no longer outside. You may not be able to see that on the camera right here, but we came indoors and got to set everything up in here, and it's been a fun time, guys, right? There we go. Thank you. It was that delayed reaction that you could tell what a morning it's been. If you're joining us for the first time, we are going through a sermon series called Reconstruction. The little intro video kind of talks about how we're taking parts of our faith and not just following them blindly, but figuring out why do we believe this? How do we follow this out? We've been going through the Sermon on the Mount where Jesus, it's his first sermon in his ministry, and he is talking to everyone about, hey, you guys used to believe this one thing, but this is actually what it means. And I know we've been going through a sermon series, so multiple weeks of this, but imagine being there that day and learning all these things at one time. And it's like revelation after revelation. It's like Jesus like, hey, if you hate someone, that means you murder them. And it's like, whoa, and people are like sitting with that, like, wow, I can't believe Jesus just said that. Then he moves on to another mind-blowing thing, and it's something we've breaking down into multiple weeks, but Jesus sat here and taught these people all in one sitting. Now, this is a great sermon. It's a great even series for us to go through to figure out why we believe what we believe. And because back then, these people, you can see through Jesus' life that he calls people hypocrites a lot. He goes after the religious leaders. He goes after the scribes, the Pharisees, the Sadducees. These are people who were the religious elite, who acted like their lives were all together, how they held authority over people spiritually, and basically were telling them, this is how you need to live your life. But these men were corrupt. And Jesus was calling them out for that. He was saying, listen, you can't be such a hypocrite. This is actually why they started coming after him, and which led to his death, because he was calling these people out. And there's hypocrites even now in our society we have in church. I mean, we live in a society where the world is looking at the church not the greatest right now. And frankly, it's partially deserved. We have pastors, we have leaders who are in the media who have got tripped up in affairs, who've got tripped up with abuse. Morally corrupt people who are now just falling flat out for the world to see. And the world's like, hey, look at the church. Look at what's happening right now. Even in our own country, we're digging up graves of children who were once held by the church, who the church said, let me do good things for you, and actually it led to death, it led to abuse, it led to these horrible things in our own country in residential schools. And that was all in the name of Christianity. Now, that's clearly not what Jesus talks about. He's not saying, hey, you guys should do these things. And that's why this series is important. That's why the Sermon on the Mount is important, because it's looking back, okay, why do we believe these things? If we call ourselves Christians, we shouldn't look like other Christians. We should be trying to look like Jesus. So through this series, we're figuring out what it means to look like Jesus, what it means to actually be a Christian. The world we live in is completely self-centered. It's all about ourselves. It's turned on, what do I get? What gain does this do for me? If I'm going to help someone out, how does this help me? I mean, if you look at social media, it's literally just self-promotion for yourself. You're saying, look at what I'm doing. Look how great I am. Look how successful I am. Look how beautiful I am. I mean, a selfie is you portraying yourself and promoting it to others. Now, I'm not hating on you for doing that, but that's just the reality of it, right? Like, that's what our society is. It's people talking up themselves. I don't know if you've had conversations with people where you're like, I can think of this one time where those conversations where you're one-upping someone. There was one time I was in conversation with a couple guys, and I think I said, oh yeah, I have to wake up at 6 a.m. for work. And this other guy was like, asked everyone else in the circles, like, what time do you wake up at? One guy's like 6, another guy's like 6:30. He's like, I get up at 5. We're like, whoa, like no one cares. People try to one-up each other like, whoa, look how great I am. It's all about me. And you're trying to promote yourself, and that's kind of the society we live in. You know those conversations. You've all had them where you tell a story and someone's like, I'm going to one-up that story. And they try to do it nicely, but you're like, okay, you're just talking about yourself now. Jesus actually says in Matthew 19 that the first will become last, and the last will become first. That those who think they're great now will actually end up coming in last. And if you look at how Jesus lived, that was his mentality. From his birth to his death, he was the servant. He came in a manger to unmarried parents. His dad was a carpenter, which means he had to work with his hands. It wasn't like he was sitting in a palace anywhere. When he died a criminal's death. Jesus didn't get a lot of treatment. Even the height of his popularity, when he was traveling from town to town, he had no house, he had no family. He hung out with 12 other guys and literally had to just sleep either outside or in some random's house. He had nothing. He was lowly. He was a servant, though, and that's how he lived his life. Serving others, putting others before him, pushing others ahead. Now, as Christians, that's how we need to live our lives, trying to put others ahead of us, not worrying about what we get out of it by trying to help others. We're going to read here Matthew 6, 1-4. This is continuing the Sermon on the Mount. It says here in verse 1, "Watch out, don't do your good deeds publicly to be admired by others, for you will lose the reward from your Father in heaven. When you give to someone in need, don't do as the hypocrites do, blowing trumpets in the synagogues and streets to call attention to their acts of charity. I tell you the truth, they have received all the reward they will ever get. But when you give to someone in need, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing." Verse 4 says, "Give your gifts in private, and your Father who sees everything will reward you." To sum this all up, when you do something good, don't go and promote yourself. When you're trying to help someone out, don't worry about yourself, worry about others. It literally says, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Although that's impossible, that's the mentality we have to have. When you do an act of service for someone else, it's almost like move on quickly. Don't even think that you did that. It should almost be mindless for it to do it, because that's just how our attitude is. Jesus says here in this verse, there's two things we need to do. We need to do good deeds, and we need to give to others, give to those in need. Now, good deeds are physical acts. You're volunteering somewhere. Maybe you volunteer once a week at a soup kitchen, at a charity. Maybe you volunteer somewhere in your community. You're coaching kids' soccer. You are helping out at your school, your kids' school, or something like that. You are doing a volunteer act somewhere. Maybe you volunteer at Collective Church. We have a room full of volunteers right now. You guys are all great. I thank you all for today. It was hectic, but you guys showed up. I'm proud of all of you. If you would like to be part of this crazy team, you can do that by filling out a Connect card, going to Next Steps, and joining us. It's fun, right? Everyone had a good time. There's smiles everywhere. I'm not going to look around, but I'm sure everyone's smiling, right? Just keep telling that. Yeah. So you can be volunteering you can sign up volunteer, you can volunteer at a church. You might just be someone who's really attentive to detail, and you know how to do good deeds because it's just second nature for you. And sometimes we look at those people like, wow, that's just a really nice, compassionate person. But as Christians, that should be all of us. When you see someone asking for money, you don't just be like, oh, that guy needs money, and keep driving past them, worrying about, oh, I'm going to be late for work. When you see someone asking for food outside of a grocery store, you don't just think, well, I have to get my food first. We're putting others before them. And if you're one of those people, I am proud of you. You are modeling that. But we all need to be like that. Because even when Jesus healed people in the Bible, he would heal someone, but often it said Jesus was moved with compassion, and then he acted. If we're not moving with compassion, then are we really being like Jesus? If those good deeds aren't following us, are we Christians, or are we just going to church? That may be harsh to hear, but this is reality, that we need to be acting like Christ. If Jesus is moving with compassion, where is our compassion? I'm speaking to myself as much as I am to everyone else. That we can't be cold-hearted as Christians. We need to be loving and caring to those around us. That includes those who are in need. We need to take the eyes off ourselves and put them on others. The other part of this is giving to those in need. Giving is handing something over that you own to someone else. That could be a possession, that could be monetary, it could be money. You could be saying, listen, you need this $20 more than I do. You're helping push someone else ahead. You take a step back so someone else can take a step forward. You're giving something away. An example of this. We had one car, me and my wife, Alyssa, and we were working at two separate places at the time. 3 kids, 1 car, 2 workplaces. And a pastor in town, someone had donated a car to him to give away. And he called me up and he said, would you like a car? I was like, yes, obviously. Like, everyone would like a car. And he told me about the car, and he was a little bit hesitant. He's like, just so you know, it's a little bit older. I was like, that's fine. I just need somewhere to take me from point A to point B. And so I get to his house, and he shows me the car, and it is a 1999 Honda Civic. This was a year ago, so this car is 22 years old now. 23 years old, I guess, technically, because the model number is usually a year ahead. And this man who donated it, he said, I don't need this car, but I can find someone who does need it more than me. He donated a car to someone like me who was in need. And it wasn't like I had a second car. I'm like, I'm going to sell that other car for a bunch of cash, keep that cash, and I'll just drive this other car. We were in need. We were praying, God, how are we going to figure this out? God, help us out, because we were stuck. We couldn't afford a new car, but God made a way. And that's how some of us need to live our lives. Maybe we have possessions we don't need, but there might be someone who is in need of it. It's not the same thing as tithing if you're giving money. That's different. That's giving to God. Giving money to someone in need is different. You're helping someone who is in need. Maybe you're giving to a charity. Maybe you're giving physical possessions. Maybe you're just seeing someone who's asking for money and you're giving them a toonie, $5, $10, $20 bill, something to help them go forward. Giving is taking a step backwards to help someone take a step forwards. You're not worrying about yourself. You're taking your eyes off yourself. You're saying, I don't need this. You need this. You're not worrying about, well, I could use that $20 for food. That $20 is going to be more valuable to someone in need than it is to you. We need to be serving and promoting our neighbors, those who are struggling with poverty. Because sometimes we just focus on ourselves, right? Even think of going through COVID, through all of this. It has been a rough year. All of us have been focused on us, right? Which is kind of our mentality. We're going to try and survive. You're like, for us, it is, we have 3 kids. How are we not going to sell one of them off because they're frustrating us, leaving one of them outside? How are we going to get through this year? How are we not going to be at each other's throats? How are we going to make it through? How are we going to be safe? How are we going to still try to put a smile on our kids' faces? How are we going to put food on the table? And that's what the last year has been for most of us, last year and a half. But now that thing's starting to open, we need to start taking our mindsets off ourselves and putting them on others. Even if you have been vaccinated fully, it's like, great, I can go back to my life. But now we need to be thinking, okay, what about those on the other side of the world who have no access to that? How can we help others? How can we put others ahead of us and take a step back of ourselves? A true story of this is, I don't know if this is a dad thing or this is a me thing. My dad did it. My wife will buy our kids Christmas presents, and they'll kind of have like a nice theme. Like it might be like Lego for our son or like dolls for our daughter, and they'll kind of just go together, and she'll like package them up, kind of like 2 or 3 presents in a tier, and like wrap them in a bow really nicely. And then I go out Christmas Eve, and I'm like, Alyssa, I bought the kids this toy. And she's like, why? I'm like, I just thought it was funny. She's like, why? I'm like, I don't know. It's a Star Wars Darth Vader Mr. Potato Head. That's hilarious. Our kids should have that. It's like $20 on a stupid toy. And she kind of looks at me weird, and I'm like, Alyssa, this is a great thing. They're going to love it. 3 months down the road, no one's playing with it. It's just tossed aside. I'm stepping on the pieces. That $20 really could have helped someone out more than my own kids. What I should have done was gone to Compassion, gone to a charity, and been like, listen, let's put this $20 at Christmas time to someone else. There's a trend going around, even people's birthdays, like you'll see people post online say, instead of giving me gifts, donate to this charity. That should be our mindset, and saying, instead of me getting all things, instead of Christmas time being all about me, what do I get? What can we promote others? How can we put others ahead and take a step back ourselves? Jesus calls us to give. He calls us to serve, but to do it humbly. You might have to someone to take a step on you to get ahead. And that's countercultural, right? Because it's very much like the rat race. Like, you got to work as hard as you can to get up there. You got to promote yourself. You got to work hard. It's got to be all about you. It's going to be countercultural to try and push others ahead of you. Think of a workplace. It's all about, well, I want the promotion. I want the raise. I want this. We don't get happy when other people get promotions or raises because we're concerned about ourselves. Now, maybe you guys can't relate to this, but sometimes we do good deeds for negative reasons. And you're like, what do you mean we do good deeds for negative reasons? There's a lot of time you're going to help someone out, and we've all done it, where you do it because you're thinking of yourself. Maybe your mom signed you up to do something like, hey, can you help Grandma move something? You're like, Mom, I don't want to do that. She's like, I'll give you $5. You're like, oh, sure. Then I'll do it. Think of the first time there's this agreement. When someone moves, you get them pizza, right? The first guy who ever signed up for that, he was like thinking like, someone's like, can you help me move? And he's like, no, I don't want to help you move. And they're like, I'll buy you pizza. He's like, deal. I'm in it for the pizza, which no one is when they're moving. They're like, I'm going to help you move because you're a friend. I'm not going to move your couch up 2 flights of stairs for 1 slice of pizza. I'm going to do it because I love you, because we're friends. Although the pizza is appreciated, but it's not a fair deal, let's admit it. Maybe you've probably helped someone because it has benefited you. This happened to me. So when I was dating my wife, Alyssa, we would often eat at our parents' house, and at the end of the meal, I'd be like, don't worry, guys, I've got the dishes. And I would take everyone's dishes, take them over to the sink, and everyone's like, wow, that Joel, he's such a great guy. Look at him picking up those dishes. Alyssa, you should marry this man right now. Our opinion has completely changed of him. He's a great guy. No one said that. No one thought that. The only person thinking that is me, because I'm selfish, and that's what I'm thinking. I'm like, I'm going to do this good deed to benefit myself. No one in the room cared. They're like, this guy's an idiot who's trying to kiss up. That's probably what happened. It worked, maybe, but that's how our mind thinks. We're thinking, I'm going to help this one person because maybe they're going to owe me down the road. Maybe it's going to help out in my favor. We're not concerned about doing good deeds. We're concerned about people having a good opinion about us. That's what we care about more. We're not even cared about helping others. We care about what people think of us. It's like, well, I got to sign up for this because if I don't help, people are going to be like, oh, that Joel, he's a loser. He didn't sign up. He's not going to do it. He doesn't care about others. We're helping others out, but it's actually to try and help ourselves out. We're trying to impress people. And that's what the world is trying to say, right? It's like, well, how great is this person? Well, we can only judge how great this person is by what they're doing, by what we physically can see. And that's what these verses 1 to 4 are saying. It's like, don't worry, you've already gotten your reward by doing the act. There's no other reward after that. Your Father in heaven is already going to reward you for doing a good deed. You need to stop worrying about what others say. It literally says here, blowing trumpets. Like, imagine if we did that at church. You, came over and you're maybe, when we have it set up at the back and you, give your debit, you little tap, and then you give, and then you just whip out a trumpet. You're like, dur, 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 dur. Guys, I just gave. It's like when you're at the variety store and someone wins a lottery ticket, and it's like, winner, gagnon. Everyone's like, that's not what we do at church. We don't do that. If you start yelling out, hey, guys, I just gave, we're probably going to be like, listen, don't do that. One, that's really embarrassing. Now, someone's got to do it now at some point. I'm going to do it at some point. That's pretty funny. Listen. But that's what we don't do. We don't announce what people give. We don't announce how people give. Because it's supposed to be a private thing. You're not doing it for accolades. You're doing it because that's just what God tells us to do. We need to be humble in our actions. Matthew 5, the chapter before this, it actually says in the Beatitudes, the meek will inherit the earth. The meek are those who are humble, those who are quiet, those who are low. They're the servants. They're those helping others out. There are those who are concerned about others. It doesn't say the successful. It doesn't say the great. It doesn't say the proud. It doesn't say these people who are awesome, the strongest people, the most beautiful people will inherit the earth. It says the meek. We're trying to get more and more and more, collect more possessions, but all that stuff doesn't matter because the meek will inherit the earth. If we want to inherit the earth, which means obtain heaven, we need to be meek ourselves. We need to stop trying to worry about us and worry about others. And Jesus models this at the Last Supper. Just before he dies, he has a supper with all of his disciples. They're all sitting at the table, all on one side of the table as that painting goes, right? Because that's how we all sit. Totally normal. But before that supper, he washes his disciples' feet. Now, you're like, oh, that's gross. Feet are gross. Think about it back then. They didn't have cars, so they had to walk everywhere. They didn't have socks. They didn't have shoes. They had to wear sandals. They're walking everywhere. Baths and showers weren't normal back then. These guys' feet were gross, crusty, dirty, all these gross things. But what would happen is when you went to someone's house for dinner, the servant of the house, the lowest person in the house, would wash their feet. As you came in, they would wash their feet to present you clean for the house, for the dinner. And that's what Jesus did. And his disciples were like, no, don't do that, because they knew how great he was. They knew he was the Messiah, that he was the Son of God. And he was lowering himself to put those guys ahead. He took a step backwards so they could take a step forward. And even when the disciples say, no, don't do this, you can't do this, he said, I have to do this. That was Jesus' mission, was to put others ahead of himself. The Son of God is putting others ahead of ourselves. That's what our mentality needs to be. Now, don't go washing people's feet right now. If you want to, go for it. It's fine. Do your own thing. Feet lovers out there. But what we need to be thinking is, how can I put others around me ahead? How can I put my team ahead of me? How can I serve those around me and not just myself? The possessions we own, your bank account, your house, all these things, your titles, those aren't going to come with you when you die. Those things are going to be left here. We need to focus on creating lasting change. That means giving and serving others more, pushing others ahead and taking a step back ourselves. Matthew 5:12 also says, our reward isn't here on earth, our reward is in heaven. It's exactly what it says in Matthew 6 there. Again, that we need to be pushing others ahead of ourselves. That the Father in heaven rewards. We don't get rewards from earth, we get rewards in heaven. There's a book I was reading, and it's by this author named Malcolm Gladwell. And in his book, it's called David and Goliath. And the whole premise of the book is that underdogs aren't really underdogs. They succeed because of the situation they've been put in. And now we look at David and Goliath as the ultimate underdogs, right? And this book goes through it, how actually it wasn't that uneven of a fight. He brings in scientists in his book to talk about how Goliath, who we see as this 8-foot, 9-foot man, however tall he was, a giant, he was huge, fighting David, who was a teenage boy, this little guy, who had no armor, no sword, all he had was a slingshot and stones. But actually, the scientists and the medical experts that are brought on for this book have a theory that Goliath actually might have been blind, that they think Goliath might have had this medical condition. I didn't write it down because I couldn't say it, so he had a medical condition, okay? And what happens with that said medical condition is that your body continues to make HGH, human growth hormone. So your body keeps growing and growing and growing. The world's tallest man actually had this medical condition. And he was still growing up until his death when he was in his 30s and 40s. He was still growing. He couldn't stop. But the only problem with that is that your body also creates tumors a lot quickly. And they think that Goliath actually might have had a tumor where it created him to be blind. Because if you read the story of David and Goliath, again, this huge, giant man, this great warrior, he had to be led out to the battlefield by someone. Now, if you are this fit, strong, 8-foot, 9-foot tall giant who everyone's afraid of, why do you need someone leading you out unless your vision is impaired? Now, it wasn't that he was blind completely, but it was that he probably struggled to see. So someone had to lead Goliath out on the battlefield, which isn't normal for, you don't see your professional athletes being led out to the court by someone. Now, also with this, they talk about how when Goliath is taunting David, he says, do you come to me? If you're, again, a strong, athletic warrior, you're not saying, come to me. You're actually chasing people. You're going after them. You're not letting the fight come to you. You chase after that fight because you should be stronger. You should be faster. He also says to David, you come to me with sticks like a dog, multiple sticks. David had one shepherd's staff. Goliath was seeing two. Anyways, so potentially Goliath couldn't see. But the other thing is that in war, there's three kinds of way you can fight. Well, multiple ways. Back then, there was three. You had cavalry who were on horses, very fast, but they were prone to your infantry, which Goliath was. Those are your slow guys with lots of armor, with spears, with swords. They can't move very fast, but they're really strong. And then you had guys who were artillery, shooters, now it would be like your snipers, those long-range guys. And back then, your artillery was your slingshots. They actually said that David and your most trained slingshotters, that's a word, sure. Those guys who shot slingshots, they could shoot, or they could throw a stone so quickly it would be the equivalent of having a handgun. So David is actually standing here on one side of the valley with a handgun, basically, and Goliath is standing there with a sword and a spear. Goliath literally brought a knife to a gunfight. That's how the story goes. And we see it as, well, this short little guy beat this big guy. But actually, David was more prepared for the fight. David changed how the fight was going. He wasn't fighting on Goliath's terms. He was fighting on his own. And that kind of relates to us, that sometimes in life, we think we need to act like Goliath. If David put on all of Saul's armor and went up there and face-to-face with Goliath, even if Goliath, his vision was impaired, he would have beat him. He could have thrown this little boy. Goliath is probably double his size. He would have picked him up and thrown him. But David changed the rules. He says, I'm not going to follow those rules because I can change them. which I don't know how anyone else thought of that, but David did. And this is the thing, is that sometimes we trying to act like others. We look at our friends, those who aren't Christians, and we saying, well, I got to act like them. I got to try and be successful. I got to show everyone how great my life is. I got to do this. I got to do that. We're playing by the wrong rules. But instead, God is saying, your reward is in heaven. That's the fight we need to be worried about. We need to be worried about trying to be successful in our own fight. We're fighting different ways. As Christians, we need to be focused on what God has called us to do. In this life, he has called us to impact change on others, not on ourselves. We need to be focusing on putting others ahead and taking a step back ourselves. The rules have been changed, but we keep trying to fight the wrong way. We're trying to fight the way the world is telling us to do, when God's like, don't worry about that. Your reward is in heaven. We're fighting a spiritual war, not a physical one. Our mindset needs to change with that. We need to be concerned about the things of heaven where our reward is. Proverbs 12:7, it says, one person pretends to be rich, yet has nothing. Another pretends to be poor, yet has great wealth. This is actually quoted in that book, David and Goliath. Because if you look at it, one pretends to be rich, well, that is Goliath. He thinks he is rich. He thinks he has everything. He's so confident. He is calling out all the Israelites saying, I got this. I'm going to beat you guys because I'm bigger and stronger. But the truth is, the rules were changed, and Goliath wasn't told. Goliath had nothing. David had everything. But this proverb is also talking about us today. That we are the ones who need to pretend to be poor. It's not about showing off your wealth, how great your life is, because we have everything. When you have Jesus in your life, you don't need to worry about what the world has out there. You don't need to be concerned about everything going on, about how successful, how much money you have. You need to be concerned about what God is calling us to do. He gives us hope. He gives us purpose. Trying to fight the wrong fight just leads the wrong way. In verse 4, that's why it says, the Father in heaven rewards us. You might be concerned with, well, my neighbor down here has everything going for them. I just wish I had a better job. I wish I had more money. I wish I had a better house. But that's not the reward we need to be chasing after. Maybe you're watching this morning and you're like, well, I'm not a Christian. Does this still apply to me? But maybe you're tired of running that rat race. You're saying life just keeps going around and around. It's like the merry-go-round with the horses. Sometimes there's highs, sometimes there's lows, but it's the same music, the same distance, the same thing ever going on. You're just tired of going in that circle, and you're like, okay, what's the purpose? What's the point of all of this? Maybe you feel like you don't have a reward. You're like, well, I don't have a reward here on earth or in heaven, it feels like. But today that can change. If you're watching this morning, there's going to be a little button in our chat that's going to pop up and say, I want to commit my life to Jesus. And what that is saying, I want to start collecting rewards in heaven. I don't want to continue trying to chase after the rewards here on earth because I'm not very good at it. It's a lot harder, frankly, too. Maybe you're tired of going in circles saying, I don't feel like I have any hope, any purpose. When you follow Jesus, you can have that hope. That ride ends really quickly with him. It's way more exciting, more of a roller coaster than it is a merry-go-round. If you're a Christian today, I want you to pray for opportunities. As we talked about giving to the poor and volunteering and doing good deeds, pray for those opportunities to appear. You might be thinking, well, I never see anyone who is in need. One, that's wrong. Two, we need to open up our eyes. I pray for you that on your way home, you can see those opportunities because there's people around who are hurting. We have neighbors who are hurting. And sometimes we sit back and we become judgmental, like, Jeff hasn't cut his lawn yet today. Well, maybe Jeff is sick. Maybe you're like, those kids are so loud next door. Man, they really need to get a hold of their parenting. Well, maybe that's an opportunity for us to step in and buy them dinner, do something for them. As humans, it's natural for us to sit back and judge, but what we need to be doing is showing compassion to others. Not pointing the finger, but lending a hand. Helping those around us. We're going to go back into worship in a few seconds. What I hope while we start to worship is that we can think of how we can help others. Because there's people in our life who need that help. Maybe for you, you're like, well, I don't have time to volunteer. Well, do you have time to give to those who are in need? I pray that we start moving with compassion. I pray that we start focusing on the reward that is eternal, not the reward that is here on earth. Why don't you guys stand with me as we go back into worship? And take time to reflect, take time to pray, take time to say, okay, God, what are you doing in my life? God, help show me examples where I can help others around. Let's worship together.